show the latest calc stuff. So last week we previewed some of the pivot stuff. A lot of that has landed. Then we've just been sort of following on with that. So now, like one of the big changes this week is previously, if you clicked on a pivot, it would just say like C1 here. In this case, now it will like make a pivot reference. So it'll actually be just this pivot. And then let's see. So if I want to like do this one plus this one, it just makes the pivot math a little easier. And the way to think about pivots a little easier because it was kind of confusing to like click on one of these and get C1 and then try and divide by another C1. It was kind of broken. So that's one of the big changes. And then the other one is we now have the ability to sort of on the fly create what at Looker were called super measures, but they're effectively like non-pivoted calculations. This part is all still pretty fresh. There's one or two problems with aggregates that we're ironing out, but if you just like move it out of the pivot, it's no longer an unpivoted, or sorry, no longer a pivoted calculation, which because this one was a pivot plus a pivot didn't make sense. It was just copied all the way across. So in this case, you want to create a super measure, and then I can always move it back inside the pivot if I want. So it just gives the user a little bit more flexibility, kind of a power user functionality. Like I think you kind of have to know what you're doing when you get into this, but it's at least now possible to kind of create these. And I think that's it for this week.
Question, Richard, for the pivot. When you clicked on the cell and you got the pivot, does that is that like always a static reference, or is it like take the offset with it on? I don't know if you can follow what I'm saying, but like when you did that, if you now go over to like the next column, if that was inside the pivot, would it be like C2?
Oh no, it is not a pivot offset. It is writing a fixed pivot reference. We could make it write a pivot offset really easily. I thought that this is probably
shows this one.
Yeah.
I'd have to think about it. I don't know if I have an answer off the bat, but we do have pivot offset as a different function, so you could make that would be like the transient version.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know actually if what the user would expect. But yeah, the pivot offset would be like a relative calculation across all the pivots, and so each calculation ends up different.
Awesome. That is a good point though, because in the other in non-pivots, it's relative by default. So
yeah. Do we think we'd prefer it to write a pivot offset? Because I mean, it's pretty trivial to change. Well, open to suggestions.
I'll give it some thought. I don't have an immediate answer.
Yeah.
Also, if other folks, Jess, Jack, or other users have feedback on that, let us know.
I wonder if we should consider like a short-term customer advisory board for at least like this type of thing, because we get it, people are using it and we get a good amount of feedback on it. I know Tam even got some this week. But I'm sure we have customers that'd be more than happy to get more involved in that.
Yeah, I'm sure Colin would have an opinion or will have an opinion later.
Yeah, my take on that, and yeah, I'm sure Colin will have an opinion too. But like, I think I actually kind of love the idea of pulling together a few power users and letting them talk to each other too. Yeah. But I have seen the customer advisory boards get overly formal and process based, and obviously we don't do that very much. So I think we're good at not falling into that trap. But I think just like starting a Slack channel with those folks would be great.
At one point, we had discussed taking like the calcs channel we have internally and just adding customers to it, or having a customer version, which like Chris, what you kind of said. So maybe on, I don't know if we want to do that per feet, like on a certain feature basis or just general, but open to some.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There. I could see like at least embed being sort of a different dimension, like a different subset of customers, obviously. So, but at the same time, like there's certain customers who are definitely power users across the board versus others.
Yeah, my concern about embed is like there's so much to cover, and a lot of it is established, that we may have one that's like very vocal and brings up some things that other customers may not be aware of. But I think for calcs, it might be a little bit safer. Plus,
Yeah, that one we should maybe wait till we're a little further along.
They're paying us money for this stuff. Colin isn't.